because you've done a lot of national TV work on this, these recent developments in the Ramsey case. So tell folks what's going on there.
Well, here it is. I was privileged to be on the Today Show, but I wasn't making the news. It was really Lynn Wood who was making the news. When last you left the Ramsey story, you probably remember Lynn Wood represented the Ramsey family. Dan, you might have the sound. I don't see mine right now, although Brad was giving it to me. But Lynn Wood made some double click. There's my double click.
Oh, the double click.
Brad said double click. I don't know what I'm supposed to double click on, but you've got it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to double click on the story. No, it's not a go for me, but you got it, Dan. Let me set it up for you. I wrote about it on Huffington Post, Denver. Here comes Brad Lopez.
For the double click. Now, there's an art to this. Watch this, the speed. Those hands should be in a TV commercial. You know, remember that Seinfeld episode with the hands? George was going to be the hands model?
No, I don't remember that, although we've been doing that in our house, the shadows and stuff like that. But here's the story, Dan. You are one of the best analysts of true crime dramas, and JonBenet is an all-timer, epic drama. Lynn Wood came on the Today Show to castigate the Boulder police. You remember the killing, Christmas, 1996. Little JonBenet, poor JonBenet, found in her basement. It isn't that there weren't clues. There were too many clues in that case, and somebody has to fit them all together. That's what Tom Kobe tried to do. That's what Alex Hunter tried to do, but they weren't up to the task. Kobe got replaced, as did Alex Hunter eventually, by Mary Lacey, who's been replaced by Stan Garnett. The thing about the police, though, is that the case was handed over after John Eller got removed from the case, Tom Kobe pretty much removed. There was a gathering. I remember because I was with Peter Boyles. It was December 1997. Julie Hayden was there. Julie Hayden interviewed me today for their 9 o'clock news on Fox 31. Bottom line is, Mark Beckner, then a commander with the Boulder Police Department, came out and told the world, we have the Ramseys under an umbrella of suspicion. I had never heard that phrase before, but the first time most of us ever heard that combination of words was out of the mouth of Mark Beckner. Mark Beckner is now the Boulder police chief. Mary Lacey exonerated the Ramseys in one of her last moves before she left office. You asked Stan Garnett on September 17th on our show, you said, what about that exoneration of the Ramseys by Mary Lacey? Does that still stand? And Stan Garnett said, I'm not going to have any comment on that. Great question by you. Very interesting response by Stan Garnett, who has turned the case back over to Mark Beckner, the guy who put the umbrella of suspicion on the Ramseys. Well, Lynn Wood, the attorney for the Ramseys, didn't like that a bit, and he fired back on NBC's Today Show. Here we go. Push the button.
The Ramsey family was very vocal about the incompetence of the Boulder Police Department in the mishandling of the investigation of their daughter's murder. And it was the Ramsey family that was instrumental in having the case removed from the Boulder Police Department and taken over by the Boulder District Attorney's Office. Last year, a new district attorney came into office and essentially gave the case back over to the police. And I think the police chief out there is vindictive toward John Ramsey. And I think it is an outrage and an abuse of Burke Ramsey for him to relate any information to Burke, who was 9 years old when his sister, his life's best friend, was tragically murdered, who is 23 years old now and has lived a very difficult life that has overcome his sister's murder, the accusations and media scrutiny against his parents. Can you imagine what it was like for Burke to go to school every day? And then the death of his mother, and now to come out, graduate from college, start a job, and then all of a sudden have the Boulder police get his name back out in the press, where he's now falsely being speculated about in terms of possibly being a suspect. It's just an outrage, and it should never have happened to this young man.
Well, and you know what, Lynn Wood, and we're going to hit this break, come back to Stan Garnett, and then would love your thoughts, but to a certain extent, Lynn Wood has himself to blame for this, because Lynn Wood was able to fill in the blank. I don't know, I wasn't there. Charm, cajole, push, whatever it took to get Mary Lacy to do something no good prosecutor should ever do or would ever do, and that is to clear the Ramseys without having another solid suspect. So Linwood was able to, quote-unquote, accomplish that on behalf of his clients, but it had to be clear to him that if a competent district attorney then took the job after Mary Lacy left, that district attorney would have a legal and moral obligation, and an obligation first and foremost to the girl who was brutally murdered, to put fresh eyes on that case. So, Linwood might have thought he could pull it over on Mary Lacy, but he shouldn't have thought that he could pull it over on whoever might follow her.
Well, Stan Garnett pretty darn busy running for Attorney General. When we come back, let's play that sound for Stan Garnett and get his reaction. I do think that's the biggest change in the Ramsey case. New DA in town with the new way of doing things. Plus, you do have that intriguing DNA evidence. I hope someday this case is solved, but it's good to bring you up to speed on these latest developments.
Yeah, so Stan Garnett after the break, and then 4:04, Peter Boyles will join us on these very interesting developments in the governor's race, including essentially Dan Mays, in a way, endorsing John Hickenlooper. So what does that tell you about Dan Mays? That and more ahead. Dan and Craig, 630 Kitchen. 317, Dan and Craig, 630 KHW. Stan Garnett in a second. These interesting developments in the Ramsey case. We'll play that sound of Linwood, the Ramsey's attorney, now criticizing Boulder. Let's go to the VIP line. Welcome. Boulder District Attorney Stan Garnett is also a candidate for U.S. Attorney, for Attorney General of Colorado. Back to 630 KHW. How you doing, Stan?
I'm doing well, Dan. How you doing?
Great, thank you.
Hey, Stan. Good to talk to you.
Hi, Craig. How are you guys?
I was hired June 1, 1980 in the Denver DA's office. What year did you get hired?
Well, I was hired as a clerk in 1981, and I began as a deputy in October of 1982.
Well, I bring that up so Dale Tooley would have hired you?
Yeah, I think Neil Richardson and I were the last two deputies that Dale Tooley hired before he went off to run for mayor.
I bring that up because I spoke with Flossie Aston today, and Flossie worked for Dale Tooley for a long time. And she told me that Wednesday at 10:15 a.m., and I am going to be there, and I want to see if you can make it, Stan, because I know a lot of people who are hired by Dale Tooley, like you and me, they're dedicating that plaza at the new Denver courthouse. I know the governor and the mayor are going to be there, and it's a great honor to Dale Tooley, and I just wanted to put that out there. It's open to the public Wednesday, 10:15 a.m., and sure, the public remembers Dale Tooley, who ran for Denver mayor 3 times, was a longtime DA, but I'd sure like to see all the old crew, because let's face it, Stan, you and I owe a lot to Dale Tooley.
That's right, Craig. I had some people call me this morning. I'm going to try to be there. We owe a lot to Dale Tooley, and we're not getting any younger.
That's right, and so let's all look at each other before we get too old.
Right.
Before we get off on JonBenet, how goes the campaign?
Campaign's going great.
Did you watch Linwood on Saturday, the Today Show?
No, I haven't. Brad sent me the link, and I just haven't had a chance to watch
here,
it.
I'll let you listen to it. This is the situation, Stan. I wrote about it on Huffington Post. I've been following the JonBenet drama for a long time, and all I really care for is justice, and I know that's your mission too. But Linwood, attorney for the Ramseys, not too happy with you or Mark Beckner, the Boulder police chief you turned the case back to.
The Ramsey family was very vocal about the incompetence of the Boulder Police Department in the mishandling of the investigation of their daughter's murder. And it was the Ramsey family that was instrumental in having the case removed from the Boulder Police Department and taken over by the Boulder District Attorney's Office. Last year, a new district attorney came into office and essentially gave the case back over to the police. And I think the police chief out there is vindictive toward John Ramsey. And I think it is an outrage and an abuse of Burke Ramsey for him to relate any information to Burke, who was 9 years old when his sister, his life's best friend, was tragically murdered, who is 23 years old now and has lived a very difficult life, but has overcome his sister's murder, the accusations and media scrutiny against his parents. Can you imagine what it was like for Burke to go to school every day? And then the death of his mother, and now to come out, graduate from college, start a job, and then all of a sudden have the Boulder police get his name back out in the press, where he's now falsely being speculated about in terms of possibly being a suspect. It's just an outrage, and it should never have happened to this young man.
Stan, your reaction?
Well, you know, as I've said many times, you can't be involved in political life or public life in Boulder County if you don't want to accept the fact that people have a lot of opinions about different things. Mr. Wood is entitled to his opinion. He clearly has one. And, you know, I don't know that I have much more to say than that. As I told Brad when he was asking me about coming on today, I said, I'm happy to come on, but I don't have anything to say beyond what I said when I was on a couple of weeks ago, which is, you know, shortly after I took over, I returned the case to the Boulder police. I did that for a number of reasons. I did it after I was satisfied that both the Boulder police have the investigative capacity to continue to work on the Ramsey case, and also satisfied myself that there was no bias that would interfere with the investigation. That's my view of it. Mr. Wood has a different view, and he's entitled to his opinion.
Right, but Mark Beckner, who was a commander back then in December 1997 when he said the Ramseys were under an umbrella of suspicion, now he's the Boulder police chief. You turned the case back over to him. Can you see why the Ramseys would be concerned that the man who said they were under the umbrella of suspicion is once again in charge of the investigation?
Well, you know, Craig, as I've said from the get-go with the Ramsey case, it's the evidence that will determine what, if anything, my office ever does with the Ramsey case. We have a number of cold cases that are being investigated. Some of them are being reviewed for charges. There was quite a backlog of them when I took over the office. The Ramsey case is not being reviewed for charges, but it is an open investigation, and the Boulder Police Department is handling the case, and I have confidence that they're doing it fairly.
Stan Garnett, our special guest, Boulder District Attorney. And Stan, so it would be fair to say then that Mary Lacey's clearing of the Ramseys is no longer in effect. You're not bound by that. You're just going to follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Well, what I've always said about Mary Lacey's exoneration that was issued in June of 2008, or July, I guess, a few months before I took over, is that it speaks for itself. I've made it clear that any decisions made going forward about the Ramsey case will be made based off of evidence, and anybody with information or evidence that they think relates to the Ramsey case should provide that to the Boulder Police Department. I know that my office gets 2 to 3 active tips a week. Some of them are from people that probably don't have useful information. Some of them may have useful information. We forward all of that to the Boulder Police, and if they ever think they have developed a case or evidence, then we will take a look at that and decide if charges can be filed.
And Stan, for the many in the audience who, you know, aren't actively involved in the practice of law, when you say that the exoneration speaks for itself, are you saying that it's Mary Lacey taking action, that action, and this I think would help clarify for folks in the audience, that action doesn't have any particular legally binding effect? It may cause complications if there's ever a prosecution of a Ramsey down the road, but it doesn't have a legally binding effect on you. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I think that's what most of the press related about the exoneration at the time that it was issued.
Here's another interesting thing Linwood had to say. He said Burke Ramsey has cooperated from day one, that he testified in front of the grand jury. Interesting confirmation of that fact. What about the 9-year-old, Stan? Following the case, I don't see any way a 9-year-old could have fashioned that fairly sophisticated garrote, nor write that kind of ransom note with the vocabulary and handwriting. So it always made sense to me to eliminate Burke as a suspect. Is that good thinking on my part?
Yeah, I think generally that's good thinking.
Yeah, Stan Garnett, our special guest, and Stan, I saw a report recently that reported, when they were reviewing the history of the Ramsey case, that the grand jury had not returned any indictments in the Ramsey case. I had one good source tell me that was wrong, that in fact there was at least one, maybe more indictments returned. Can you tell us one way or the other?
You know, Dan, it would be improper for me to make any comment about anything that happened in the grand jury. Okay. So I can't say anything about it. Perfectly
legitimate and understood. There's so many interesting developments. Dan Garnett joined us earlier in the 3 o'clock hour to talk about the latest in the Ramsey case, and you know, he approached it appropriately within the bounds of ethics for a prosecutor, and but I think made it crystal clear that he is not bound by Mary Lacey's clearing of the Ramseys. He will follow the evidence. Lynn Wood striking out at that, because Lynn Wood, who will join us tomorrow at 3:19, was quite comfortable with Mary Lacy, and I think able to, get his way with Mary Lacy and get Mary Lacy to do what he wanted Mary Lacy to do. Obviously, Stan Garnett is not going to do that, so Lynn Wood critical of Stan Garnett, so we're grateful to have Lynn Wood tomorrow at 3:19.
Yes, it's exciting for those of us who've been following JonBenet. I don't know if it means anything, but I think the tension has been established. If you go to my piece on Huffington Post, I titled it JonBenet Truth Might Still Be Told. I think it's interesting that Beckner and the police department, can you imagine their desire to resolve this case? They've been a laughingstock for most of the investigation. I'm sure Stan Garnett, who's demonstrated his strong ambition, if he could solve the Ramsey case, that would be a ticket to political superstardom.
And as we go back to our phone lines on this fascinating development in the governor's race, we'll brief you on in a second if you weren't with us. The Ramsey case was so skewed by the fact that, in my opinion, one man's constitutionally protected opinion, you had an incompetent district attorney in Mary Lacy. And, I talked about that in many different examples of that, including, what she did, to the CU football program and CU football players, and got into real detail on that took you far behind the headlines. And I think we saw the same thing in the Ramsey case with this preposterous clearing of the Ramseys when she had no other suspect. And so good to see that Stan Garnett's just going to follow the evidence. But now, of course, Craig, it's a much tougher job for Stan Garnett, because when you have the prior district attorney taking that bizarre step of, quote-unquote, clearing the Ramseys, no matter where the evidence leads, it's going to make a prosecution tougher.
Right. And sorry to tell you this, but Alex Hunter wasn't any great shakes before Mary Lacy. Remember his interactions with the tabloid reporters not to get Mary Lacy that unusual letter of exoneration. I'd say the headline out of our show is, once again, you established in your questioning of Stan Garnett that letter isn't worth the paper it's written on for Mary Lacy as far as Stan Garnett is concerned. He's taken an adversarial position not only with Lynn Wood, who is very well capable of defending himself and his clients. There's a bit of a pushback going on between those two. But look at this sniping between Mary Lacy and Stan Garnett. If you look at my column, I include hyperlinks where these two have gone public now. There is no love lost. And in terms of statewide politics, no secret you're backing the Republican incumbent John Suthers for AG, but you might have a new campaign slogan, because I take it you approve of Stan Garnett's handling of the JonBenet case. Vote Suthers. We need Stan Garnett to solve JonBenet in Boulder.
That's right. No, I do approve what Stan's doing in the Ramsey case. I think it's fantastic. I strongly support John Suthers for many, many reasons we've talked about on air, but I'm glad Stan's doing